Hello, everybody. This is the KGC show, and thank you guys so much for coming back for another great episode. Today, I am joined by um, a legendary songwriter, and I use the word legendary because he's written for people like Carrie Underwood, the Oak Ridge Boys, Blake Shelton, Kenny Chesney, Billy Currington, and even the Plain White Tees. And we're going to talk about all of that here today. Please give it up for my good friend, Mr. Marty Dodson. Marty, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for the glowing introduction.
Well, you're welcome, and it's a great honor to have you on the show, man.
Glad to be here.
So talk to us a little bit about what it was like growing up and where you grew up and just talk to us a little bit about that.
I grew up in the suburb of Nashville. I wasn't born here, but I've lived here since I was five, except for 1 year. And I don't. I got interested in music in about fifth grade. I got my first guitar when I was 11. Um, and I would sit. I found a spot on our stairs going down to our basement that had really great acoustics, so it sounded like I had reverb on my voice. So I would sit there and play my guitar and write songs like about the girl I had a crush on at school or whatever. But I didn't really even know that it was a job until I became a teenager. That I became aware that people would be coming to install our cable TV or work on our air conditioner, and my parents would say, what brought you to Nashville? And they'd say, oh, I'm trying to be a songwriter or an artist and that kind of thing. And it was actually really intimidating to me because I didn't know anybody that was succeeding. I just knew people that were working other jobs and trying to be a songwriter. So I just wound up going to college. There was one commercial music at class at my college, and I took that, and it actually kind of discouraged me because it was taught by a realtor, not by someone who was full time in the music business, and he was very knowledgeable and he was great and had done a lot of jingles and stuff like that. But it again kind of reinforced my belief that, well, maybe that's not really a full time job. It could be a hobby, but not a full time job. So I got my degree in. I got out, quit the music program, so per se, and just got a degree in psychology. And then I worked for about 10 years. I got offered a job as a youth minister uh, while I was in college, and then I got offered that job full time when I got out of college, and I kept getting offered jobs to do that. And like 10 years later, I'm like, I didn't really pick this career. It was like I just kept getting opportunities and I took them and I enjoyed it. But by that time, I had kids of my own, and it was requiring me to be away nights helping other people's kids and stuff like that. So I read a book called What Color is Your Parachute that talks about finding a way to make a living with your passion. And I thought when I read that book, it has some exercises for you to go through. When I got through with the book, I realized, well, if I could have done anything, I would have been a songwriter, but I was too scared, I think, to try it. And so I just kind of started it. And at first, I was having to work and do other things as well. And um, just like everybody else, so I had to try to figure out a way to make a living while I was trying to get things rolling. And then I started writing with one of my peers, another guy who didn't have anything going on really. And he got interest from a publisher. And then the publisher heard all the stuff we had written, and the publisher approached me as well. And that kind of led to my first writing deal. So that
You
may be a
know,
lot more than you asked for in that question, but that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
well, and that was a great story, and when you got your first writing deal, what was that like for you, uh saying, "Hey, this is my hobby, this is something I love to do," and you just mentioned that you didn't think that you could make a living out of it. Uh, what was that like for you when you got that first writing company contract that really kind of changed it around for you? What was that like?
It was scary, honestly. I mean, the I think we all think we have great songs,
Yeah.
and I had 20 songs that I thought were the best things I'd ever written, and I had demoed them, and so I'd spent probably $20,000 on these demos, and I mean, not 20,000, probably 10,000. Um, and so I play him for my new publisher, you know, because he had only heard the stuff that I wrote with my, you know, with the guy he had already signed. And I said, which of those, you know, are you excited about and do you want to pitch? And he said, none of them. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, I don't think any of those songs are really going to get cut. And he said, I tell you what, if you write for me for a year and I'll mentor you, and if you still think those songs are great, we'll pitch them. And I said, okay, I'll do that. You know, so he mentored me and put a lot into me. And after a year, we looked back at those songs, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? And I actually said, why did you sign me? And he said, I signed you because I thought you had potential, not because you were great. And I'm like, okay, that hurts a little bit, but at least it's honest, you know. But at the time, he and the other writer that we had were writing 3 songs a day, and my publisher was getting Garth Brooks cuts right and left, and you know, ASCAP Writer of the Year and those kind of things. So even within my office, it was hard to get a song pitch because these guys are great, you know. And I'm so then I'm kind of like, well, there's hundreds more people out there do it that are just as good as them
Mhm.
who've been writing for years, you know. And I think it really was a eye opener for me, in that it showed me where the bar was, you know, and it also showed me you're not as great as you thought you were, so you better get to work. And he was very good about reminding me. He was like, if you want to be, you know, we signed you to a 5-year contract, but it's 1 year with 1 year options after that. So he was like, you don't put everything you got into this, you're not going to be around.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it really was a shift of thinking from, okay, this is just a hobby that I write when I'm inspired to write things, to this is my job, and I got to compete with these 2 guys that are great right here in my office, you know. And so it really opened my eyes to the fact that I better get to work. And so, you know, I think that first deal did provide some great opportunities, but it also was just the beginning of the work. You know, it wasn't, oh, I've arrived now, I got a staff writing deal, you know. And my first draw or advance was $866 a month. So it was, again, not enough. You know, I had 2 little kids at home, and then 3 pretty soon. And, you know, so I was still having to do other work to make, you know, to be able to live and do it.
So when you let's talk about some of those songs that you wrote. When you look back at, having hit records, well, not hit records, but having cuts for people like Carrie Underwood and Billy Currington and Kenny Chesney and Blake Shelton and the Oak Ridge Boys and people like that. Which one of those sticks out to you? Like, I can't believe I wrote for Blake Shelton.
I think the biggest one that sticks out that I can't believe is Joe Cocker, honestly, because you know, he's just like a legendary artist. And to have, so I had his last #1 before he passed away, and he included my song on his greatest hits package that includes everything from his career, you know. And so that was just one of those, like, what is happening here? You know, the others, while they were super exciting, they were actually things I had tried to do. So I had spent several years trying to learn Blake's music, so I could get to the point where I could write something that was in the ballpark for him. So it was great confirmation of, like, hey, you finally did it, you know. But it wasn't a surprise in that I had been trying to do it. And the same thing with Kenny Chesney. I love what he does. I've tried that for years. The Carrie Underwood thing, I was writing it with somebody from her management company. So we went in that day and said, hey, let's try to write a Carrie cut. And we did. And she cut it, you know, because it had a connection to that camp, you know. So I would say by far the Joe Cocker thing. And then I guess the other one would be, I had the Song of the Year in Korea and all of Asia one year from a song that I wrote with some guys in Sweden. And again, he's like, what? You know, how did that come about? And it was a legendary artist in South Korea that had quit singing when his wife died. And on the 10th anniversary of her death, he decided to make a comeback record. And they kind of equated him to like the Paul McCartney of South Korea, the biggest one of the biggest artists. And so that the fact that my song was his comeback song after 10 years was crazy. It's like, how did that happen, kind of thing.
When I think of your career and when I think about what you and Paul Overstreet have done, I admire Paul's work. I think everybody in Nashville or anybody that has an aspiration for writing songs love Paul Overstreet. I
That's
know
it.
because I do, and I can't write a song to save my life, but I try to. But talk to us a little bit about, you know, coming together with Paul and coming together on songs. Have you guys ever had like a really you like that song? Or is it very much of like a team and brotherhood?
Very much like a brotherhood. I mean, as circumstances developed and our friendship developed, we've played shows all around the world together, and so we became very close friends. And in the beginning with him, I was super intimidated. I mean, I was sweating bullets the first time I pulled up to his house and went in his little writing room and saw all the awards that he's won all around the room and all that kind of stuff. But I learned early on from that my publisher that was that kind of writer that was in the Hall of Fame later, and is that they're just as susceptible to writing a bad song as I am. They're just humans, and um, you know they've had a great level of success, but you know I need to just go in there with the attitude that I've got something to offer, and I'm going to bring everything I've got. And it may not be as much as Paul Overstreet has, but he's never said to me, "Hey, you didn't contribute enough on this one," because I try to bring some great ideas for him. I save up ideas for him when I know I'm going to write with him and that kind of stuff. So I think it's intimidating at times, but the um, Tom Shapiro, who's a huge hit writer and one of my mentors as well. The first time I wrote with him, I think I was just going, "Oh, that's great! Oh, awesome! I love that!" And he stopped me and he said, "I need a co-writer, not a cheerleader."
Yeah.
And he said, I wrote with you because I feel like you have something to offer, but you're not bringing it. You're just telling me I'm great." And so he said, don't drop that and engage with me more. And that was really helpful to me to know
So
that he wanted me to, he wanted more from me, and instead of wanting me to shut up and just let him be awesome.
yeah. So when you're working with these A-list, people, that you sometimes have to pinch yourself because if I got to work with Paul Overstreet, I'd pinch myself till I can't feel my fingers anymore. Is there a quote or is there like a advice that they gave you that have helped you that you could pass on to others songwriters that want to do what you do?
I mean, I think it's less, that quote from Tom Shapiro is probably the biggest quote I can think of, but I think it's more just watching their work ethic and watching the choices they make and why. I mean, I've been very fortunate in that they've been really patient to if I say, why do you think that's better than this, they can tell me, and I go, oh, okay, I learned something from that. So I can't think of any other like specific words that they said to me, but it's just more the experience of being in there in the room with them, watching the process of how it happens and what they're trying to do. Tom Shapiro, one thing he told me one time was, like, if we had an idea, he would sit and like tap on his legs like different rhythms. So like if the title was "A Man Loves a Woman," he would go, "A man loves a woman. A man loves a woman," and he would just keep doing it with different kinds of feels. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "It's got to feel right coming out of my mouth. It's got to feel natural, like the way you would say it, with the emphasis on the right word, a part of the word that I want to be important and that kind of stuff." And that is something that I go back to. It's like just making sure it's going to set. When a singer sings it, it's going to feel right coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, and you can hear it and talk to us a little bit about writing for the Plain White Tees. We've talked about your country music things, but that's a totally different genre. Was that kind of a coincidence or was that just I just did this?
No, I played a show at the Bluebird one night, and this is the only time I've ever had something like this happen from playing out. But I was playing at the Bluebird, and this guy came up and said, "Hey, I'm Tom. I really love your lyrics. Would you be interested in writing with me for our upcoming record? I'm one of the singers of Plain White Tees." I'm like, "Man, yeah, I'd do that." And so we wound up writing at 9 o'clock at night and drinking wine and writing most of the night. And I think I got home at 3 or 4 the next morning or something like that. Um, but he just had he knew. I mean, he came in and he said, "We're doing this album called The Wonders of the Younger. It's going to be weird. It's going to be, just way out there kind of stuff." And so that was a scenario where I would throw out lines and he would say, "No, that's too country. No, that's too country." And so he helped me, just bring it into the realm that he wanted it to be in. And so one of those songs is called Cirque dans la Rue, which is Cirque Party in the Streets, basically. And so it has all kinds of craziness in that song. And, he just kind of guided me, like, he's like, right here, I want it to sound like I'm talking through a megaphone. So we wrote this part that sounds like he's talking through a megaphone. And then there's all these other things going on in this party. And then another one was, he's like, we got, there's all these songs about I'm gonna love you no matter what. He's like, I want to write a song. It's like, would you love me if I'm this? Would you love me if I'm this? Would you love me if I'm a killer? And so we wrote a song called Killer, and like it's pretty dark song, But both of those songs we wrote in one night.
Wow. It's amazing what you can do and you know what you can take from the advice you've learned from country music and apply that to everything else in your life, not only songwriting, but I would imagine you could use some of those things that you could turn a song out. You can make a song about doing the dishes and make that a number one hit song for somebody because we all know doing the dishes is something that everybody has to do. So I bet somebody can relate to that. Do you
Yeah.
ever feel like when you're writing, you resonate with a lyric, then that makes that when you resonate with a lyric, does that make you say, I bet the crowd can react to this too?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of what I write is in that ballpark. I think most of what I write is not complete fiction. It's at least based on a true story. I think Blake had a song called that. Um, so it may not be my story, but it's a story that's adjacent to me somehow. I've been with someone who lived that story or that kind of thing. Some of the things like the Carrie Underwood song, it was three guys writing a male bashing song. So we just tried to think, okay, if we were a woman, what things would we get ticked off that a guy would do. So that was more having to put on the fiction hat a little bit and stretch out.
Yeah. And I love the Carrie Underwood song. I love the Billy Currington song. I love the two congratulations on 2 weeks at number one. What was that like?
Crazy. I mean, that must be doing something right. Took, I think, 52 weeks to get to the top of the chart because Billy, and one of the special things about that song too was Billy and I wrote early on in our careers. And I remember one day we were sitting outside my office. He was waiting on a ride to pick him up, and we were sitting on the curb of my publishing company. And he was like, "Man, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my record deal. I don't, I'm not getting stuff going that I need to have going." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm afraid my publishing deal is in danger too, because I was with a new publisher and I had not had any hits for them." And so along comes Must Be Doing Something Right, and he cuts it, and it's his first number one, my first number one. And so that was a very special song just because of that personal connection. I love that I got to share that with him because we're both thinking we may be out of this business, at one point. So it was really cool to have that experience with him.
Yeah, and it's not, uh, when I just heard that story, I felt it was more of a friendship type of level than it was business, and you know, obviously with Billy, you get to call him a friend, and I would think that with Billy, it's a little bit more special just because that's your friend, that's your buddy. So getting
Yeah,
that number one with him is pretty special for you, I would just imagine.
yeah. And I don't know if this is true. We didn't actually pitch it to Billy. We pitched it to his record label, to Brian Wright over there, and he loved the song. And I was told that he had to talk Billy into cutting it because it was kind of different than what Billy had done, you know. And so I've never asked Billy about that. I need to
Yeah,
see if he
but
listens to that song.
yeah, man, and everybody watching the podcast, I just want to say thank you again for watching the podcast. Marty, thank you so much for being here. It's my honor to have you on, and we'll do this here in about 6 months to a year to check back up on you, and
All
where
right.
can people go to keep up with you?
You can follow me on Instagram. It's Marty D Songs on Instagram. So at Marty D Songs. Songtown is a company I started to help teach and train songwriters. So Marty at Songtown, people can reach me there, and they can check out Songtown if they want for lots of classes I teach and stuff like that.
Well, you guys can go to Instagram and everywhere to go find Marty. Follow him on Facebook because he's a pretty fun poster. I follow him on Facebook, and
I'm a goofball.
yeah, you are, and so am I. So that's what makes us pretty good friends. So
Yep.
Marty, thank you again for being here, sir,
You're
and
welcome.
can't wait to do this again with you.
All right. Thanks, Caden. See you.
Thank you guys. Love you guys. Love one
All right.
another, and thank you guys, and don't forget, God's got everything. Love you.